So a couple reminders here from the start. Some people are saying they're getting a notification on Classroom every single time I post anything to Classroom. Is this true for you? Nod if it's true. Okay, if that is true, you can change that, and you should change that, because I post things all the time and you do not want to get an email every single time I put up like a PowerPoint, right? So there is instructions on Classroom. Sorry, in the Tech Tips module, there is a link that talks you through how to change your notifications. So you can actually choose if you want to see only like when an assignment is graded, right? Like you can change your notifications on Classroom. You should not have your Classroom set to where you get an email every single time I post anything, because that is a lot of emails. And some students have said that they can't, like if I email them personally, it gets lost in all the Classroom emails. So you definitely want to fix that if that is you. And again, the instructions are located in the Tech Tips module. There's a thing that says too many notifications, like do this. So do that. Also, since we are Zooming today, obviously I can't do the morning office hours this morning because I'm in Zoom meetings during those times. So if you need to come to office hours today, I will be having them from 1:45 to 3. So in any time we Zoom in the mornings, I'll do the afternoon office hours instead. So 1:45 to 3, and don't forget, one of your assignments is to come to the Zoom office hours, and so that might be a good time to do that. You can also come Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday to fulfill that assignment. Assignment number 3 is due today, so that's your search journal assignment. Don't forget, when you see that it's been graded on Classroom, you want to open it up, because I have feedback for you on those docs. You know, there could be feedback about a source that looks questionable or ideas for where you could go next. So make sure you open that up, or topic feedback or whatever. So remember, you got to open up the doc to see the marginal feedback, and you want to open it up on a computer, otherwise you won't be able to see comments to the side. I also want to remind you for class next time, so Monday or Wednesday, whatever day you come, there are some textbook readings that are due for that day, so make sure you are looking at the checklist for week 4, which is now posted on Classroom for that reading assignment, or you can check the course schedule for the reading assignment that will be due next time. So there's nothing along with that, but you will need to make sure that you've read that, because I'll be sort of referring to some of the things that the textbook said there. If there are any questions, you can unmute and ask them now, or you can put them in the chat, and I should be able to pull up the chat. Any questions before we keep going? So today's topic, as I said, web research and evaluating web sources. So, you know, you probably are familiar with this already. Anytime you open up a web page, I'm sure you're thinking, is this a good source to use? But when we're incorporating sources in Comp 2, in a more academic setting, it becomes even more important, especially important to pay attention to some of these things. So these are supplements to the textbook readings. The textbook provides a lot of important information, and we'll go over some of that, but a lot of it I'm sort of depending upon your reading of the textbook. So some tips for researching on the web. Use very specific search terms. I don't recommend that you type your whole research question in, but just the key terms from that research question, and make them as specific as possible. I also recommend that you go, instead of just open Googling your topic at first, you go straight to a reputable news site. Go to NPR, go to New York Times, go to Forbes, and so use the search bar there to start. And then, you know, Google can give you some good sources, but you have to wade through an awful lot that are more questionable to find them. So go straight to the news sites. And also, of course, a good starting place is the library search bar, but you want to keep in mind that the library search bar will give you all types of sources. So use those limiters to find the type of source that you're looking for. And this week's lessons talk to you through some of that. I also want to show you this site, which I really like, and I have found this site to be really reliable for assessing whether sites themselves have a tendency to lean. So keep in mind, first of all, even if a site, an overall news site, tends to lean left or right or tends to be biased, you also want to take a look at individual articles. So some sites can be pretty goofy, but individual articles within them may be more goofy than normal for the site, or maybe, you know, more responsible than normal. So, but it is kind of helpful to go here. You can put in any type of search, like news site here. So I could put New York Times here and search it, and then it will sort of rate the website for you, or the news site for you. And you can, it will give examples, it will give like different ways that it came to that rating. So you can see here, New York Times tends to lean a little bit to the left, but it's still left center. The information they report tends to be factually true, even though sometimes they interpret that information with more of a lean, right? But they don't usually put like just untrue things or untrue reporting. So a lot of information here about how and why they ranked it. And the rankings on this website are done by people across the political spectrum. So they employ a team of diverse perspectives to come to these types of rankings. So that is available for you to use as well. When you're searching online, you want to avoid entertainment news sites. So you can tell that by sort of how the website is set up and the types of things they tend to report on. Propaganda sites, so a propaganda site is going to be something that has a very strong leaning and is like manipulative in the way it reports news, and like everything they choose to put on the site is advancing a particular type of like political perspective. Avoid conspiracy sites or like pseudoscience sites, and any sites that have a clear political agenda or a strong political bias. So you can sort of look at the homepage of the site, and if they have a lot about, like they're clearly focusing on smearing one side or the other, or they're clearly focused on advancing a particular type of agenda just by looking at the headlines, that's generally a site that you want to avoid. Unless you're researching into how they tend to portray a perspective, you know, if you're doing something like that. So it's really important to know the type of source that you're dealing with. And I want you to know too, there are different types of news sources. So sometimes students get confused. They see what's actually like a feature story or a column, and they talk about how biased it is. Well, a news report is not supposed to, a news report is supposed to be objective. So that's just saying a thing that happened, right? So that should be free of opinions. But if it's something like a column or an editorial, the purpose of that type of news reporting is to report a particular person's perspective. And so these are going to be more opinionated because that's what they're supposed to be doing, right? So they can still be biased. You may still want to check them out because they do show a lot of bias. They may still have like a tacky language, and in that case, you don't want to take it as seriously. But some types of news are supposed, or some types of journalism are supposed to give a perspective. And so it's okay if some things have the author's perspective within them. That doesn't necessarily make them biased or not credible. So keep that in mind. And you can come back to this. I'll post the slides if you want to look deeper into it. I'll save some examples for later. Also, as well, some other types of online articles that you want to be wary of are things like blogging news. So they're written like a blog, even though they may contain news or they may contain links to real sources. So they're informal, they're conversational, and they contain the author's commentary or interpretation as well. So you just want to be aware that this is like sort of written for more of an entertainment purpose. Be aware of advertising on the sites that you're looking at. If all of the advertising is for a particular type of product or for a particular type of perspective, then you want to be wary of it as well, because the site may have like an agreement with particular advertising people about what they're going to show. They may be making money off of that in a sketchy way. And of course, to be wary of anything that looks like it may be propaganda. If the overall site seems to be dedicated to enforcing a particular political agenda in a really strong way, you want to be wary of that as well. So here's an example website that we can sort of talk about. This is called Natural News. But one thing you want to look at is the overall, just sort of, this is a particular article, but overall the types of things that the site is publishing. So if you look over here, some of their articles from today, you can notice some really sensationalized and very dramatic language. So, COVID science insanity, anal swabs and face diapers is a headline here. So that should clue you in that even, you know, even if you're looking at an article that looks a little more reasonable, some of these terms that they're using are really, really dramatic. This one says the Biden globalist agenda to delete humanity through global extermination. So that's pretty dramatic, right? And even like a capitalized delete here. It very sensationalized. And overall, this website definitely tends to promote and is trying to promote a particular political perspective. Even within the article, you can notice some language that's kind of problematic because it's so emotional and extreme. So in this language, this article is about the Gardasil vaccine. And they use things like the young woman was shot to death by a vaccine. The story gets swept under the rug. They call Gardasil an assault weapon, a modern day assault weapon. So it's, you know, a very emotionalized piece. They have links to studies. So I want you to keep your brain on. Having a link to a study doesn't necessarily mean that it's a credible article. Sometimes they link to a study, but then they misinterpret that study, or they take the study out of context, or the study doesn't actually relate to what it is they're talking about. So you do need to look really carefully. Having a link to a study doesn't necessarily make it credible, because they do have links to studies throughout something like this. You want to look at who the author is and what types of things they tend to write about. So you would want to click that. And then you can see over here, the types of articles are all sort of like, you know, it's for like organic protein powders, sort of like natural cures for like terrible diseases, those types of things, a folding credit card knife. So, you know, there's a clear type of ideology going on a site like this. It doesn't necessarily mean when you see a site with an ideology that everything on it is like, you should just dismiss it. But these are clues that you want to keep your brain on as you're reading some things like this. Okay. So when we're evaluating a web source, the textbook provides us some tips for evaluating the source type. So not only is it a news source or is it sort of blogging news, but what type of language does it use? What style is it written in? What's the design of the overall page? Does it look professional, or does it look a little like basement-y, like sketchy? And as well as the content, what types of things does this website tend to talk about? And how does that relate to its credibility? Accuracy, credibility, objectivity, currency, and comprehensiveness. So this is Practical Argument, page 300, page 2, page 308, and you will need to have this part of the textbook open and ready as we begin to evaluate. Also be aware of the confirmation bias cycle. So the textbook talks about confirmation bias, and I really like the section on it. But confirmation bias, we talked a little bit about when we did the scout versus soldier thing. Confirmation bias is where you open up a source, you read a particular piece of research, and then your brain is sort of biased to dismiss anything you disagree with, or to find valuable anything that you already agree with. So it's sort of the way our brain resists anything that contradicts what we already believe. So we read a piece of research. If you agree with it, you're more likely to be critical of it. You look for ways the research is flawed, and therefore dismiss the research, and you get to hold on to your previous preconceptions. If you find a piece of research that you happen to agree with, you're less likely to be critical of it. You're less likely to turn your brain on to looking for things that could impact its credibility. And therefore, again,